So, hello and welcome back to what is arguably my very favorite part of the woods near where I live. This used to be a part of the nature trail that is a part of the campground that's near me, but probably 10 or so years ago, they switched the way the nature trail came, and it no longer goes through this part, although some of the locals have maintained the trail, which is good because I can come back here and kind of just chill out. If you look around, you can see probably why it's my favorite area. It's just so quiet. It's almost like a little cathedral out here in the woods. And it's because it's mostly hemlock trees, which are awesome, amazing trees that give you, sorry, the cutest pine cones in existence. I'm probably going to collect some before I leave, but I thought that this would be a really good spot to do our chapter recap if I can find some place to put you. So give me a minute to see if there is some place I can stick this camera where it's not going to fall over. And we're going to recap two chapters of Lady Night. All right, with you guys precariously balanced on a fallen tree and me sitting on said tree, we are going to give this our best attempt. If you fall over, I apologize. I think I have you propped up fairly well, though. And we have quite the rabble rousers in the background. I can hear blue jays, and not too long ago I saw a pileated woodpecker, so who knows? You know, that would be kind of cool. And maybe they'll all come in and yell at me for disturbing their peace. But if you remember in the last chapter, Kel, who was bound and determined to rescue her refugees from Haven, set off in pursuit and was quickly overtaken and met by not just Tobe and Peach Blossom, but Owen, who she tried to persuade to go back. She was also overtaken by Dom and his squad, who she was a little bit happier to see. That's a pileated woodpecker, by the way. That is a pileated woodpecker call, and he seems very mad that I'm talking. Oh well. And she was also overtaken by several of her friends who are newly minted knights. She couldn't really persuade them to leave, so she's kind of stuck with them, and that is where we left. But we did leave her thinking maybe it wasn't so bad having her friends show up to help her. It does make her chances of rescuing the refugees and having her showdown with the Nothing Man much more likely. So we're going to be picking up in chapter 14 of Lady Night by Tamora Pierce with my recap of the events in this chapter. Birds. And chapter 14 is titled Vassa Crossing. And if I had to pick a chapter in this book that felt more like filler than most chapters, it would be this one. I went through it, and I mean, there are some very important things that happen. Like in the very first little bit, they come across another one of the Haven refugees, unfortunately no longer alive, and Neil examines her and determines that she probably died of hemorrhaging because she had been pregnant and almost ready to deliver when the refugees were taken, and she obviously did not survive childbirth. A little ways down the road, they actually find another one of the refugees hanging from a tree. It is the dead woman's wife. They pretty much figure that he probably died because he was fighting the people who had captured him because they had just left his dead wife on the side of the road. Not really cool. They also confront yet another Stormwing, and, you know, Kel attempts to chase the Stormwing off. They do seem to be shadowed by a bunch of Stormwings, and, you know, the Stormwings are hoping for a feast. They ride on, and Kel reflects on the fact that she really has lucked out, not only with her friends catching up with her, but with the dogs, cats, sparrows, and horses that they have that have all been made more intelligent by Dane. And Kel realizes that they're proving their worth beyond belief because they make the best scouts on Earth. I mean, well, on Tortle. And she kind of silently vows to them and to herself that if they make it out of this alive, she is going to make sure that the cats and dogs have the absolute best meat, and that all of the birds that came with her are going to get daily cherries. They come a little bit further along, and they come to the river Vassa. Now, the river Vassa is a pretty big river. It's also very swift, right, white water, and they can actually see the boats that the refugees' captors took on the far side. They talk a lot about how they're going to get across. Dom says that maybe he could swim across, or a couple of them, and, you know, bring the boats back across, but they touch the water and realize it's glacially cold and they're not going to make it. Dom and Neil bicker back and forth a little bit because Dom's like, soldiers, they just think with their swords, they don't think with their brains. Dom's like, dude, you're a knight, that kind of makes you a soldier as well. And Dom says, no, I think with my brain because I'm a mage. And he points out that he has a way to get them across. And he also smiles because they follow him because Kel's like, look, we got to get across no matter how it is. If Neil knows a way, then let's follow him. And they follow Dom or Neil a little ways until they come to a little farmhouse. You know, well, a little farm, not quite village, but more than a house. And everybody looks at Neil and they're like, how did you know this was here? Because they could obviously also have boats to cross the river. And quoting, Neil smiled crookedly. You meet the most interesting people riding with the lioness. They're usually friends with her husband, though, right? And obviously, that is referring to Alana's husband, George Cooper, who is the former Prince of Thieves, the former Rogue of Tortle, and now serves as the realm's spy master. So, Neil obviously has met a lot of interesting people being squire to Alana back when he was a squire. Neil leads them through and he lets them know that everybody except for Kel needs to stay back because these people are touchy people. Kel's fine with that, but Tobe insists on coming with her. Neil doesn't want to fight, so Tobe comes along. The Scarnans, who are on this side of the river, speak with Neil for a little while. Kel notices by using her griffin feather headband that they also have a mage among them who is kind of trying to stay hidden. And she lets the mage know that I can see you, so why don't you come out while these guys are all doing their business? The mage comes out and Kel's like, look, as a good faith gift, here is a feather from my headband that lets me see through magic. and so Kel has made yet another little friend. Neil and the farmer slash spy debate for a little bit, and the farmer doesn't actually want to take everybody across because he's like, you guys are trouble. More trouble than the slavers that we saw going by, and we didn't have anything to do with them. We just stayed hid. The old woman who Kel just made friends with then says, son, we're helping them, but not until it gets dark. So Kel and all of her troop are going to stay with these people, have a nice meal, and get ready to go across. Kel also talks a little bit with the Scarnans who are there and the old mage about the Whisper Man. She wants to know who the Whisper Man is. The lady's like, look, if you don't know, go talk to your friend, but I'm not going to tell you anything about him. And as the mage turns back to get ready to take everyone across, Kel remembers something that she wanted to ask her. Again quoting, you said that I had the hand of fate on me, Kel reminded the woman as she closed the gate and barred it. How could you tell? Do you have the sight as well as the gift? The old woman cackled. Who needs the sight to tell that much? She asked. When Kel offered her an arm, she latched onto it with her free hand, her grip like an eagle's claws, and together they walked slowly towards the woman's home. A wench in armor, wearing a griffin feather band. You got a clever set of animals about you, and you're leading 4 knights and a bunch of men who don't look sentimental. Oh, yes, and you're chasing after 200 warriors and nearly 500 prisoners led by Stedman Kinslayer. They entered the longhouse, and the old woman continued, you don't need magic to see the fate in that, any more than you need a healer to know that you and your people are deranged. Kel lets the old lady know that she tried to stop them, but the old lady's like, well, be happy that they respect you so much that they didn't listen to you trying to leave them behind. They talk a little bit more, they have a little bit of food, and then they go ahead and cross the river. Kel's not all that thrilled about crossing the river because it's a big, wide river that's got a lot of white water, and they're taking their war horses across. Jump actually steadies her across the river. Owen comments that it's going to be a jolly good fight on the other side, though, so it's fine. They get to the other side of the river. Kel decides to start riding Peach Blossom. And that's when Merrick and the other knights said, you mentioned something about the Chamber of Ordeal. You went inside a second time. And Kel's like, I had to. And they're like, you're allowed to talk about it, though? Kel says, I'm not allowed to talk about the ordeal. No knight is allowed to talk about the ordeal. But the second time I went in, the chamber said I could talk to anybody that believes me. Do you believe me? Merrick and the rest of the knights aren't quite sure, but it does kind of reassure them that Kel has a mission that's maybe not given to her by one of the great gods, but definitely given to her by something supernatural, which kind of makes them feel a little bit better. The chapter ends with them riding through the night, following the messy path that had been left by the raiders and the captives, and high overhead, another storm wing flies, keeping an eye on them. And that is how that chapter ends. Like I said, it's not quite filler, but it's closer to a filler chapter than a lot of them in the book. But that is chapter 14. Once I get a drink, we are going to move on and discuss chapter 15, which is titled Enemy Territory. So give me just 1 second. Not gonna lie, it was very tricky business getting my water bottle out of the backpack that's kind of holding you guys up. You didn't fall though, so I'm very proud of myself. All right, now we're going to discuss enemy territory, where they are definitely deep into enemy territory, obviously. They're following the refugees trail across, they come across yet more of Kel's civilians who are hung from trees. In the ground in front of them, somebody had thrust a sign that just said rebellious slaves. Kel is upset. I mean, obviously. These were people that she knew. She's mad at herself because she didn't get there in time. They don't have time again to bury them, but they put them they cut them down out of the place that they were hung and lay them out and kind of offer at least some prayers to the black god. The next day, Kel thinks about the fact that she kind of let Tobe know her mission by talking in her sleep, but he lets her know that she's not talking in her sleep anymore. Dom, who is nearby, is like, it could be that now that you're on your way to this confrontation, you probably will stop, like, dreaming about it. Kel also thinks that the animals are probably getting a little bit spoiled because all of the men are feeding them and, skinning their game for them. The dogs and cats are eh, getting well cared for. Kel keeps thinking that maybe when they get back, the animals are going to think that the humans are their pets. I just found that funny because I sometimes think that all of my porch friends also think that I am their pet. Um, they ride on, and again, the animals that Kel has with her are the best possible scouts and let them know that they're on the right trail. They also bring attention to anything else. Kel thinks as they're riding that this place looks so much like Tortle, but she shouldn't let the similarities soothe her because they are in enemy territory. Kel also sees a glimpse of bright color grabbed her attention. With a thin smile, Kel leaned down from the saddle and plucked a bit of red yarn from the end of a twig. That doll will be bald as an egg by the time we find Meech, she told Neil. He grinned. They're tough, those young ones, he remarked, keeping his voice quiet. It amazes me how tough they are. Kel sobered immediately, though, remembering Blaze's workroom that she saw in her vision and the white shape that called Mama. Their young people would have to be tough to get away from the mage and his dog Stedman. They keep going along, and Kel's worrying that maybe the people that they're chasing are going to be lost because this is a well-traveled road, but they keep finding trail sign that's being left by her very intelligent people who know that she's probably following. They also have more cause to bless having the animals along when Owen, who is scouting, lets them know that they have company. They do have to do a fight, and Kel debates on the ethics of not taking prisoners. I mean, they can't leave anyone behind alive that is going to let the enemy know that they're there. It's not a beautiful thing, but they do go through the fight, and Kel lets all of the dogs know, with Jump as their boss, that she needs their help, that she needs the dogs to do whatever they can. hamstring the horses if they have to, don't let them escape, and kill the riders if they can, or if they can't, to come and get a knight to do it. The dogs and cats move out to do their part of the battle, and the birds also, very, very smart, thanks to Dane, move ahead, and Kel asks them, not lets them know, but asks them to signal her people when the riders that they're trying to ambush are in bowshot range. Kel also tells Neil that no matter what, he is not to heal any of the prisoners. Not exactly beautiful, but they go through the fight. It's a very short fight because the Scarnans know that they're in their home territory, and obviously they're not going to be attacked there. But yeah, it's a very short fight. Kel then tells everybody to strip the weapons off of these soldiers that they have killed and hide them because they might actually need them later. She says her own prayers for even the enemy dead, and they move on. Quoting, as they rode on, Kel thanked Mithros and the goddess for her animals and for Tob. Without them, she and her men might well have been caught. With them, no enemy soldier or horse got away to warn the locals. She also thanked all the gods for the 2 farmsteads that they found later, both abandoned. Dom remarks that, yeah, these people probably moved out because they decided that maybe it was better to live across the river in Tortle than to live with King Magar and everybody. They debate about the talk, and one of Kel's scouts comes up and shows Kel a blob of horse poop. Not exactly something that you normally pick up as a scout, but the important thing about it is that it's not dried up, and that lets them know that they are now way closer to their quarry. Um, Dom says that they're right about here. He opens up the map and shows her where he thinks that they are. And there's 2 rivers nearby. It's almost dark, so their quarry is less than a couple of hours ahead of them, and they're probably going to be pitching camp. So this is it. It's time to get their quarry back. Their scouts go out and see that there's about 200 fighters in this camp that they have made, and they're sloppy. You know, they are guarding the people, but guarding them poorly. One of Kel's scouts says that he saw some of the enemy soldiers like nodding off, and it's not even dark. Tob is very upset to find out that, along with being quite troublesome, his friends have been whipped and probably abused in other ways. Tob is very upset about that, and Kel thinks to herself for a few minutes and says, did you see the other squad of convicts that got captured and were being taken? The scout nods and says, Kel says to him, can anybody on that squad pick locks? She comes up with a plan, sending the animals in with lock picks and knives and other things, including some packets of herbs that are going into the guards' pots, because the slaves, the civilians, are being used as, slaves. They're being used to set up the camp, which they do poorly. They're being used to cook the guards' foods, which they probably burn as much as they can. And now they have their hands on some poison. The civilians, of course, recognize all of the animals that are handing them out this stuff. And a couple hours later, the guards, kind of extra sleepy now thanks to the packets of stuff that Kel sent the refugees in their food get attacked. The horses and everything fight on Kel's side, even the ones that belong to the enemy because of Tobe, who can communicate with them thanks to his wild magic. And it was a fairly short fight because all of Kel's people who were able to fight fought with her. Kel does see one of the young female civilians from Haven who is beating on a dead man. She's been quite abused, but Kel reassures her that it's as over as it can be. I mean, it probably won't ever really be better, but at least she's safe now. And the one thing that they notice in all of this fighting, and again, I'll just go ahead and quote, Kel was refilling her water flask when Tobe raced up to her. Lady Kel, they ain't here. Louie and Meech and Guido and them, they ain't here. Kel nodded. I know. During the fight, she had noticed there were no children in sight. She had expected that in a way. They were taken? She asked Fanch. Sunset, last night, Idris told her through puffy lips and broken teeth. Across the ford. They're with 150 soldiers and that animal Stenham riding. You'd have been proud, said Fanch. They fought like wildcats, all of them. We were terrified that they would be killed, but Stenman wouldn't let them be hurt. Now he has them. God knows where they're going. Owen asks where they were taken, where the ford was, and the civilians let them know exactly where they were. Kel thinks to herself that they are on their way to the Nothing Man, so she summons her soldiers, lets them know to drag the bodies in the wagons into the room or into the woods, get everything out of sight. Merrick, she tells to take all of the civilians and take them back to either Mastiff or Fort Giant Killer, somewhere safe. Merrick argues with her. And Kel's like, no, our duty is to get these people back and safe. I can't go back with them. I have to get the little ones, and I have to settle with Blyce and Sten and Kinslayer. Otherwise, don't you understand they will be making 200 more killing devices? Merrick reluctantly agrees. And one of the refugees is like, can't we come with you? Can't we help you get our children back? Kel's like, no, you can't. Your duty is to get back. I will bring your children back to you in one piece. And that is where the chapter ends. So Kel got most of her civilians back. Not all of them, obviously. We didn't get the kids back, which is not cool, but also not unexpected. And yeah, that is where those two chapters end. Also, I think all the birds are coming in closer, which is one of my favorite things. If you sit in the woods long enough, the animals resume their normal routine. And now, just for grins, I will turn us around and walk you around, like I said, my favorite. It probably doesn't look like anything all that exciting to you, but it's just such a beautiful spot filled with hemlock trees. And it's always just quiet. Even in the height of summer, hemlock forests tend to feel cooler because the canopy blocks out pretty much all of the undergrowth. And it's just nice. And then you walk through and, it's just beautiful here. And I really do appreciate the fact that some of the locals have maintained this portion of the trail, because it was my favorite spot. I also like there are other areas that I've been to with hemlocks, and hemlocks are really cool because they can grow in super poor soil, and their roots, if they're on rocky ground, just grow up and over the rocks. It's very cool. Anyway, my thoughts on those two chapters. I like those two chapters because they do a lot of development with Kel and the chase, you know, trying to get the kids back. But both of them kind of, in a way, feel a little bit more like filler chapters, like I said. I don't really consider them to be filler chapters because there's a lot of important stuff done, like getting most of the captives back, just not the 200 kids. But it does feel a little bit more like a bridge chapter. That being said, we are heading into the very end of the book and the final big fight. I mean, obviously, you probably already can guess that Kel will get her match with the Nothing Man. The question is, will she end up getting the kids back? Or will she be too late? You have to kind of hope that she won't be too late, or this book would end with a very big bummer. But we'll just have to wait and see, won't we? I like Kel. Like I've said before, I think that she is my second favorite Tamora Pierce character. The first being Becca. And that's mostly just down to her personality. You know, she's tough, she's determined. She's a lot of the things I would like to be and don't think I ever will be. But she's very aspirational. All right, well, with that being said, this was slightly shorter than I thought, but again, semi-filler chapters. But thank you so much for joining me out here in the woods. It's kind of gorgeous. I hope that you enjoyed the background, and I also hope that you enjoyed the recap. Be sure and hit the thumbs up if you don't mind. It does always make me smile, and I will see you next time.